Thanks for tuning in. We'll get rolling any minute now. I am just doing a little bit of a sound check to make sure that's working, and then we'll get rolling. Okay, and sound is working. Thank you for tuning in tonight. This is going to be kind of my regular Monday evening webinar session, and going through just topics that come up from time to time with questions with athletes that I work with, or other folks out there, or things that I see pop up on Facebook groups or chats, that kind of thing. So yeah, aiming for Monday evenings around 7 p.m. And tonight I am going to chat a little bit about indoor training. And I'm not trying to convince anyone that every session you do should be inside, but try to just help make the time that you spend inside a little bit better, a little bit easier to tolerate, and hopefully possibly bring a little bit of quality into that training, or just your riding, just enjoying riding. So I encourage you as well to ask questions as we go along, because there is a little bit of a delay. By the time I get to the end and I say, hey, does anybody have any questions? There's about a 2-minute delay between when you hear me say that and when I see the questions come in. So, and you can type those questions right into the comment box, and I will be able to see those. So without further ado, quickly about me, my name's Andrew. I'm a full-time professional cycling coach. I retired from cycling as a professional cyclist. I competed with the national team for over 10 years and several professional trade teams, wrapping up my career with the Norco factory team around 2015 or so. And I've also worked with several amazing coaches over the years and learned a lot from them. But I also went through my own coaching development, and now I am an NCCP competition development coach. That's our kind of new level 3, as well as a professional mountain bike instructor. I'm certified level 2 air, which means I'm basically certified and evaluated to teach people how to get rad on their bikes and get some air, drops, jumps, those kinds of things. And I also am a Training Peaks level 2 coach, as well as certified through them as well for their power certification. And my quick little contact information there. Just really quickly, just as a little bit more about me and what my coaching focus is. A few people ask me about that. I get people, maybe younger athletes, ask me if I work with 12, 13-year-olds, or who it is that I work with. But mainly I do work with masters athletes who are busy and they're trying to balance their training along with their family and careers. I also work with juniors and up to the elite level with, I don't want to say high performance athletes, I want to say athletes who strive to be high performance athletes and strive to compete professionally or at the international level. And I also do custom training plans, one-off training plans based on people's time and their abilities and the events that they're aiming for. And also skills development. That's another big thing that I love to do. I love getting out on the trails with people and helping them with those skills, because that's free speed. And that's obviously a bit more of a summer, spring, fall type of service, but I also love doing that. I love teaching people wheelies and manuals and jumps and turns and all those things. So that's where I'm at. And if you're tuned in now, please ask questions as we go. Please ask questions in the comment box, because there's a little bit of a delay. And if you wait to the end, I might not be able to get the question. So right into it. Again, I really don't want to tell anyone they should train inside. This is more of sometimes we're stuck inside, or sometimes we don't have the time, the gear to ride outside through the winter. Sometimes it's traffic. Sometimes it's road conditions. There are just those times as cyclists who want to train, cyclists who are still continuing with a training program through the winter months, which is the most important time to be on a training program, how do we make that better? How do we get some more quality out of that? So some of the benefits of indoor training is it's a highly controlled environment, and meaning there's no traffic, you can dial in your nutrition, the fridge is only steps away if you need a snack, water, those kinds of things. Weather is always consistent. Terrain, I know that we can use Strava to kind of manipulate the terrain. Mechanical issues, all those things that actually could get in the way of outdoor riding, we can kind of actually eliminate those. And it's also safe and anxiety free for many people who live in busy areas, and there's no cars inside, there's no horses inside, there's no runners inside, those kinds of things. We can kind of eliminate a lot of those things that could cause us a little bit more stress. I do know of people who train all inside, even through the summer months. They love training, they love the controlled environment, and they do it. Now, I still think as cyclists we want to get outside. It's enjoyable to ride outside. But training inside is also highly time efficient. And if you're a time crunched athlete, there's nothing quite like having your trainer kind of set up, and we'll go into that environment, and just kind of putting on your bib shorts and grabbing a towel and a bottle and jumping on your bike and getting a 45-minute to a 60-minute workout in. It can be more time efficient than getting dressed for 20 minutes to go ride outside, checking your bike over, making sure you haven't forgotten anything, going out, coming back, and your bike's muddy and your gear's muddy and all those things. So you can save a lot of time that way. And I really do think it equates to high quality training when you put all of those together. So those are the benefits. Some of the drawbacks, yes, this is the most common one. It can be very monotonous and boring, all those things. It can be mind-numbing. I've heard it all. I've been there. I've put countless hours in, on a trainer, on rollers inside. So we'll go into a few strategies there. The other drawback is there's no real handling skills required. So we want to make sure that we don't necessarily lose those, and we reacquire those as we start to ride outside or start to ride with groups. Another one is climbing specificity is diminished as well, and I'll go into some of those. There's nothing quite like riding the trainer all year, riding the rollers all winter, and going outside and hitting that first hill and realizing, oh wow, how do I climb again? And this feels different, Zwift aside. So I'll touch on some of those. And also, this is another one that comes in to me in coaching and things that I experience is reliance on erg mode if it's used a little bit too much. So erg mode, if you're new to indoor training or smart trainers, is when the trainer is in control of the power output that you have to resist against to meet that power requirement. So really all you can do is control your cadence, and the smart trainer is always keeping up. So if it's set at 150 watts, no matter if you're pedaling at in any gear, 50 RPM or 100 RPM, the trainer is going to adjust so that you're doing 150 watts. And there's pros and cons to that, but I find some people become reliant on erg mode if they use it every time they ride inside the winter, and then they go outside and they have to produce their own power. So how can we kind of overcome some of this? So the boring factor, if I can call it that, I like to think of indoor training, we want to keep it, whenever possible, short and sweet. And if we can add structure to those, it doesn't necessarily have to be intensity either, like high intensity. But whenever we can add some structure, whether that's controlling your power, heart rate, RPM, adding in RPM drills, doing things like that can help pass the time a lot quicker. If we do want to do longer endurance rides, the old go-to is, pop in a movie, pop in an action flick, Die Hard, Predator, something good like that. Always makes the time go a little bit faster as well. You can focus on your pedal stroke. Ride rollers, I find, is a little bit more enjoyable for endurance ride, and I'll get to what rollers are if that's a new phrase for you. entering challenges, doing like the past couple weeks was between the holidays was the RAFA 500 challenge. Those can help motivate you as well. If you can jump on any group rides on Zwift, that helps. Zwift is great for meetup rides. You can actually meet up with the same people that you ride outside through the summer on Zwift, and in some ways it's even could be even a little bit more conversational, and I'll get to that. And also remember the goals that you set. You have to keep that in mind. Is why are you getting on the trainer to or rollers or training inside? Is it just exercise? Is it training towards a race goal? Is it training towards a personal challenge goal, as many of us are these days? And also with the endurance rides, are those the rides that we can substitute cross training into? So maybe that endurance ride could become a snowshoe or a cross-country ski, which I always love to do. Or maybe those are the days where you do gear up, you put on all the layers, you dress up like the Michelin Man, you plan out a good, safe route, you jump on some gravel, and you do head outside for those longer rides. But keep the shorter rides really structured so that they pass quicker. And that's, for me personally, and it depends on where you live in your own daily training environment. I always love to say cross train as much as you can, ski as much as you want to, cross country ski as much as you want to, but keep some specific trainer workouts in there throughout the whole winter, and you can come out flying. Some of the best seasons I've ever had on a bike as were coming off of winters where I would ski or snowshoe 15, 16 hours a week, and I might do 2 or 3 hours a week on the trainer. But really 80% of my time was actually outdoor cross training activities. So I do highly recommend that. As much as this is about indoor training, get out there, get outside, enjoy outdoor, in the winter, and keep indoor training specific, and you're on there for a reason. You're on there to get some specific workouts in and to meet those goals. Little handling skills, or losing those handling skills. Whenever possible, create a little bit of time for yourself to get back outside and work on some skills. 15 to 20 minutes can go a very long way to maintaining those skills and even maybe developing some new ones. And this goes for in the summer as well. It's always great to brush up on some skills, and lots of slow speed. Just find some grass, find some not icy terrain, and work on some cornering. Practice corners at different speed. Put up some cones and things like that. Braking, track stands, brushing elbows. I know that might not be COVID friendly right now, but that's always a fun one when we can do that with a buddy. Bumping and tire knocking, that kind of thing. And head body separation. Can you turn your head and keep riding in a straight line? These are those basic bike skills that sometimes we can forget. And there was even some anecdotally, when the professional cyclists this year got back into racing, there was a lot of comments about they were crashing more because they actually stopped training together. A lot of them trained inside or solo, and then all of a sudden they got in a group race of 150, and they were lacking some of the same reaction times. So build some time in if you can to keep those skills brushed up. Climbing is another one that I touched on. So to make it a little bit more specific, one thing that you could do if you're doing some climbing repeats is raise your front wheel a little bit. Raise that front axle above the rear axle, 4 to 6 inches. 4 is actually really good. 6 is probably at the higher amount. That can help just engage the muscles a little bit differently, and like you would in real life, getting into a little bit more of a climbing position. And it would also change your pedal stroke just a little bit and change that where that dead spot is. And that's something that we miss sometimes if we're just on level ground throughout the winter. Add in some low RPM riding. I see this one a lot when athletes ride the trainer or cross train, do all those things, and then they go to a training camp in mountains, whether that's California or North Carolina, and they haven't actually done those low RPM around 70, could be a little bit lower, maybe 75 RPM. So add in a few repeats, just 5 minutes, a few reps of that, low RPM, maybe kind of higher wattage, not all out, and get into a bit of a grind. That will help you transition to climbing outside. I promise it, and it will actually help prevent those injuries as well. I've seen several athletes go to training camps without any low RPM riding, and they're out after a few days because their knees have kind of blown up a little bit. A kicker climb, if it's in the budget, and I'll show a picture of what that is, but it's basically an automatic climbing simulator where it lifts and lowers your front wheel depending on the grade in something like a Zwift, and you can also manually change it. So it's another add-on. They're not the cheapest devices in the world, but it can create a little bit more of that specificity. I have a trouble with that word. And there also is no substitute for gravity. No matter how much you follow those top 3 little tips there, there's nothing quite like gravity pulling you back down a hill. So get outside when you can and get back into to some climbing. And the old wisdom was maybe to avoid climbing, just ride flat roads for the first 1,000 miles. But I'd say start adding in some climbing as soon as you get back outside on your bike. But ease back into it. Don't aim for 1,000 meters of climbing your first ride, but certainly start to incorporate that climbing right away as soon as you can get outside. So erg mode, a little bit, another quick chat about that. Again, that's when the trainer is in charge of your power output, not you. All you can do is control your cadence, and no matter what gear you're in, you're actually pushing the same power, and we can become reliant on that. And my rule of thumb is, as you near outdoor riding season, so as you get closer to, for us in the Northern Hemisphere, I'm up here in Horseshoe Valley, everything's a little bit different, depending on where you are, start to, turn erg off more and more as you get closer to that outdoor riding season, so that you can produce your own power using your own leg speed and gearing. And I think that's really, really, really important. I see that a lot when people follow training plans and they just use the erg workouts every single time. They have difficulty with feel and body feel and knowing what it feels like to ride at around 200 watts and around 250 watts and 300 watts, because they have to actually think about it and be conscious about it, not just resist what the trainer is giving them, which is in erg mode. So overall, I'm not a huge fan of erg mode, and I'll kind of plant that flag. I think it's good sometimes. I think it's an interesting thing. It's neat to add in, but be careful of relying on it and using it all the time. So indoor training environment, and there's some really cool, like if you're on any of the Zwift Facebook groups, really neat pain caves that people have set up, and they have crazy lighting and sound systems, and it doesn't need to be like that. They can be very basic. So I Googled it and found this image, and I think this is a pretty basic setup here. Obviously someone's using their garage, and a couple of the key things that every good environment should have is fresh air and hopefully as cool as possible. So basements work really well for this. 10 to 15 degrees is actually great. I know when you first jump on, it might feel a little bit chilly if you have that fan turned on. I usually just have another little layer that I can quickly tear off as I start to warm up in the first 5 minutes. Have a fan. A fan is crucial to keep that cooling. It is not like riding outside where you're creating your own breeze. No matter how cold it is, you can go outside and it'd be like 0 degrees and you'll be sweating buckets. So having a fan, work on that cooling will really help bring up the quality of the ride and keep you from dehydrating too fast. It is very easy to lose a lot of water weight very quickly inside. So quick, I got one question from Andrew. I believe you're asking about erg mode does that only apply to smart trainers? For the most part, yes. Erg mode can exist on rollers. There are smart rollers, but erg is mainly a smart trainer. And if I didn't answer your question, Andrew, just type it again, and I'll get to that. So, but I think that's kind of maybe what you meant. Another thing that you can see here is flooring. You don't necessarily want to ride on carpet. Obviously, you're going to be sweating and dropping bottles and that kind of thing. So having a little bit of flooring there to easily collect the sweat and mop that up is helpful. Having some entertainment. This is key. No matter if you have Zwift or any of the other online platforms, having a screen there to play some DVDs or Netflix, VCR maybe, VHS, something like that will really help. Some music, as one person said, just pump up the Metallica or something like that. And I'm getting another question about power meters or smart trainers. And I think you can use either or for training. I generally use, to keep all my metrics consistent, I would use the same power meter that I use inside versus outside, and use the smart trainer more to control the resistance, like in your erg. And so if I didn't answer that question, then maybe type that one out. I hope that's what you meant by what could you use. Another way that I do this is I'll use my power meter on my bike on rollers to ride Zwift. Like if I'm doing a longer ride, endurance ride, and I want to ride the rollers, then I'll usually just ride my normal road bike as it would ride outside. And if I'm doing racing, I tend to ride the trainer just for safety. You can race Zwift on rollers. It's been done. It's fun. It's interesting. But I tend to ride the trainer a little bit more, just for a little bit more security. So a couple of things that aren't in this picture that aren't mandatory but are good to have is have some towels nearby, because you are going to sweat. You're going to sweat on your bike, and I'll kind of touch on that. Sweat is not good for your bicycle. It's not really good for anything. It's very highly corrosive. So you want to do all that you can to protect your bike, especially if you're using like your quote unquote good bike. It's not going to necessarily corrode carbon, but any kind of aluminum, it can eat through your carbon handlebars. So got a question about what's the best way to relax and get comfortable on the rollers so I can start juggling. Very good question. I'd say practice makes perfect. Focus on a point that's further up on the wall in front of you. Don't look right down. That'll help relax you, just like it on the road. Relax your hands, relax your shoulders, and really try to create some bike body separation. We talk a lot about that in mountain biking, but even on the road, or on the rollers, feel like the bike isn't quite part of you, and it can kind of move underneath you a little bit, and it should move underneath you a little bit. Your tires should never have to necessarily be right in the exact middle of the rollers. You've probably got about 12 to 16 inches of rollers, and it's okay to drift a little bit with that, but really focus on those hands as well. Just loose hands. Before juggling, even just, can you take your hands off the bars? Can you ride no-handed? That's the first progression to juggling. And if you have to, be next to a wall, be next to something that you're, can hang on to. Make sure that also that the rollers are set up so that the rear wheel always kind of takes care of itself, because it's in between the two. And let me go ahead to a picture of rollers just so that we know what we're talking about. So rollers are on the right-hand side, if you don't know what I'm talking about. So the rear wheel sits between the two rollers there on the upper left. I'm looking at the right picture. And the front wheel balances on that one lone roller at the front. And you want to make sure that the axle of the roller, so where the nut is there's an axle that runs through it with a bearing, is directly below your front axle, or at least as close to possible in line. And that will really help create some stability in the rollers as well, and help you with your balance and getting comfortable on them. And really, also another one, work on your cadence on the rollers. Balance comes from stability and wheels turning. So the faster your wheels are turning, the faster you're pedaling smoothly, the more balance you're going to have. If you're pedaling in your easiest gear at 50 RPM, you won't have much balance. Just like outside on the road, you have to get the wheels turning at a good clip, and that will give you a lot of balance as well. So another couple quick ones here. A side table is really handy to have, so you can have lots of snacks and drinks and your phone for your companion app for Zwift and those kinds of things. Another handy one is a whiteboard. Having a whiteboard to list, you can draw out your workout, you can have your training zones on there, you can have your goals, just something to kind of keep reminding yourself, and you can change that daily as well if you want to. What's the workout goal for today? And write that on the whiteboard. What's your motivational quote of the day? Write that on the whiteboard. I find that really handy to have as well. And all right, another question. Once comfortable on the rollers, is it better to ride them with no support around you in case you fall? I would say I would always have one piece of support near me for the rollers. I always have like like a side table. Exactly the same side table that I put on the my snacks and drinks on would maybe be some support, but there's no hard and fast rule of riding in the middle of the room. You don't have to be a hero with rollers. Let me put it that way. But you should be able to feel comfortable that you don't need it there, but it's there if you do feel a little bit unstable. All right, so another quick one that I added kind of last minute was a rocker plate. And this is a little bit more trainer specific versus rollers. And there's a lot of do-it-yourself rocker plates out there. You can also buy some commercially. Sometimes they can run several $100s, and I've seen some on Facebook that people just kind of make because they like making things out of wood, and they'll sell them for a couple $100s, and probably well worth it. Basically, the rocker plate is, you can see that underneath the bike, the trainer is strapped to the top board, and there's 3 basically rubber balls or tennis balls, and then the bottom plate. And what that does is it just creates some separation and allows the bike and trainer and front wheel and everything to move a little bit more freely underneath you, and you can get a little bit of that rocking motion. And some people swear by these. Some people say that it takes riding a trainer and make it way more comfortable, and I believe that. I don't have one myself. It's kind of one of those things that I always have kind of on my list to either maybe make or pick up. But another good one if you want a little bit more comfort while riding the trainer. Okay, online platforms. So Zwift is definitely the big one, but there are others, and it can create a whole online community. There's racing, there's group rides, different challenges. They have Tour de Zwift stages. So these online platforms are very powerful to break up the boring factor of training. So I highly encourage trying one. There are several out there. RGT, which I believe is free. Ruvi, Full Gas, which is I think maybe a bit more of a racing platform. Zwift is a great one. They've got a 7 or 14 day free trial. It has a little bit of everything, and Zwift might not do everything that they do may not be perfect, but they do everything very well. And for those group rides, see where I wrote Discord. Discord's a chat app, and if there is a group ride and there's a Discord app or Discord link in there, I highly encourage you to join that Discord chat, because that can really bring up the enjoyment factor. And there's group rides like up here in Barrie. A few of the riders from the Barrie Cycling Club do Tuesday nights and Saturday morning rides, and they have a Discord link, and it's just like riding outside, at least socially. And you can chat, and you can almost chat more with everyone than if you were riding outside. And you're always riding maybe between that so and so and so and so. Now you can kind of chat with anyone. So highly encourage that Discord and for group rides on Zwift or any platform really. And so moving on, what do you need to train online or to join these online platforms? You don't need a smart trainer or a power meter to do Zwift, and that's a common question. All you need is a Zwift account, a tablet, smartphone, computer to kind of link into Zwift, and then a speed sensor is really all that you need. And I pictured one on the right there, where it's just a wheel magnet. So all it's doing is calculating your speed and what trainer you're on, and you can always use a different one, and it'll calculate your power. It's not very accurate, but it gets you on the platform for very low cost. So you don't even need a smart trainer. You can use any trainer that's holding your rear wheel up and giving you some resistance to get onto these platforms. And then you can once you're on there, you can start upgrading from there. Although it's race season, is there any harm in throwing in the odd race to your plan? What would be too much? Absolutely jump in the odd race. I'd say it depends on your plan, depends on what your goals are. Think of Zwift racing as, unstructured intensity. But I think it is good, and especially if you're struggling through some of those more intense workouts in your plan, adding in a Zwift race can really help with the motivation. It's a great way to get 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and that's what I'd recommend. Is you don't need to do the 100K Zwift races. A lot of them are the 20 to 30K Zwift races. You can get a great workout in a short period of time. What would be too much racing? It really depends on the individual, but I'd say I would definitely try to keep it under 3 a week. They can be very intense, and if you're doing more than 3, to have a reason why you're doing more than 3. And I kind of take that from just those are 3 intensity workouts in a week, and that would almost be the max that you'd want to do anyway. So kind of try to keep it around 2 to 3 max. And okay, back to kind of the basics of rollers versus trainer. Trainer's on the left. It just holds up your rear wheel and puts a resistance wheel on it. So that's more of a classic trainer. Or there's more new direct drive trainer, and that's what's pictured far left, where you actually take your rear wheel off, put your whole bike onto the trainer, which has a cassette on it, and very smooth, very efficient, great for workouts. And also on the right-hand side of the middle picture is that kicker climb that I mentioned, and that simulates grade. So that'll actually lower and drop the front of your bike. And then on the right are those rollers that I chatted a little bit about. Rollers are great for those endurance rides, longer rides. That you can get resistance units for rollers as well. If not, you might spin out quickly at higher speeds and higher wattages. So a few considerations. And I do have a couple questions. Suffering through intense interval, how do you keep positive mindset, not self-abuse, hard, isolated? Again, I'd say focus on the goal, focus on why you're doing the workout, and also making sure that the workout's achievable. And what I mean by that is if you're always not accomplishing a workout, then it's okay to look at the workouts themselves in the context of your training plan, just making sure that they're appropriate. And also talking with your coach about what, is there a point where do you just dial back the workout, or do you stop the workout and just ride or get off and just recover? And there is no one answer to that question. It really does depend. Recommended podcast. I'm not a huge podcaster. I like to read a little bit more, but I'd say the Cross Canuck podcast with Jen Jackson and Mike Vandenham has been great. And also the All Wheels Rolling podcast hosted by Mark Hamilton, which I've had the pleasure of being on a few times. Those are a couple that I would definitely recommend. So a couple of more considerations. I'm trying to wrap this up. I always go for aim for 30 minutes with these. Indoor versus outdoor FTP. Some people swear by the FTP being way, way lower inside versus outside. I personally believe that's more in the way that they test. But there should be, or there can be some difference between what you would normally use for training zones outside versus inside. So that could even go back to the last question about workouts and making sure that your zones are right for that workout. If you do transition from outside to inside, if you're going from a outdoor power meter like a Power Tap or Quark, and then maybe your trainer's off by 3%, that could also have an impact on your training as well. So just making sure that you're comparing apples to apples as much as possible. Energy output versus duration. If you're used to maybe going out and doing a 2-hour ride outside, and then you jump on the trainer and you do a 2-hour ride inside, some of those metrics might actually be a little bit lower, and that's okay, because your normalized power is always going to be lower inside, or normally lower inside, because you're not slowing down for stop signs, and you're not sprinting up climbs. So a few of those metrics tend to be a little bit lower as well. And I'd also say about the quality is 2 hours outside can be like 90 minutes inside, because you aren't going through stop signs and traffic lights and downhills and coasting and all those things. You can get a really good high quality workout inside. A trainer bike is something to consider. Going back to that whole sweat chat, I know lots of people who will ride a pretty big hunk of junk on the trainer, because it really doesn't matter. If there's one place where having a full carbon Dura-Ace 14-pound road bike doesn't matter, it's inside on the trainer. You really just want something that fits well, has a comfortable saddle, you have your fit on that bike, and just kind of works, and is efficient. You want a semi-decent drivetrain on there that feels good, that's not rusty, that kind of thing. But really, you don't need a really expensive bike on the trainer. Any bike will do you. And also, again, get outside when you can. If you have a longer ride and it's a beautiful day, I totally endorse and encourage gearing up, going outside on the bike, getting out on the fat bike, cross training, get out on the skis, those kinds of things. So this really is just about how to maximize your indoor training. A couple of questions. So I sent this out to a couple of friends as I was building this little webinar, and here's a couple that came back. And is erg mode always best? If I can't finish a workout because I'm cracked, should I just put some time in on the bike in zone 2? And so there's a couple questions here. No, erg mode isn't always the best. That's my opinion. You can feel free to yell at me if you want. Shoot me an email. But no, I'd say erg mode isn't always the best. I actually believe that turning erg mode off is the best way to train. If you can't finish a workout because you're cracked, yes, it's okay to put some time in on zone 2. I'd say if you're cracked and you shouldn't be cracked, you should really actually maybe take a rest day. In all honesty, I would wonder why you're doing a workout cracked, and that really goes into the plan, the overall plan, those kinds of things. But if you're speaking more of an intensity workout, I'd say, I'd wonder why the workout can't be done. And it doesn't mean that anybody messed up, or me, the coach, or you, the athlete, but I would investigate that to make sure that when you get to those intense workouts, you should be able to do 95% of the intensity workouts that you get. And if you're doing 50% or accomplishing 50%, then you really need to evaluate the whole plan. Moving on, what is the best strategy when my workout calls for zone 2 and the virtual world, let's say Zwift I'm in, it has me on a 17% grade and I can't keep it in zone 2. And this ties into the next question about trainer difficulty and should I be at 100% for the full winter season. So what my friend is asking me here is about just kind of following along with their training plan, keeping it zone 2 just nice and moderate, chill, conversational, but then they hit this steep hill. And this is just like outside in the real world as well. But it always feels 70% inside is really steep. It's steep outside as well. So I would say yes, it's totally okay to turn down your trainer difficulty. I'll tell you why in a second. It's totally okay. Do what you have to do to kind of keep the workout in check. And also another strategy is, can you lower the RPM a little bit? It's okay in those situations. Lower the RPM, maybe grind it out just a hair and work on some of that muscle tension, work on some of that climbing, see if you can kind of keep your power and heart rates low enough. But when in doubt, turn down that trainer difficulty, because Trainer difficulty it's used in Zwift, but it's also used in other platforms. It might just be called something a little bit differently. And so I see your question, and hopefully this is answering it. So trainer difficulty makes the hill feel steeper in the virtual world or virtual platform, and Perf Pro uses this in other training platforms, not just Zwift. So, but the tricky thing with it is 100% trainer difficulty is different on every smart trainer. So trainer difficulty basically, let's say you're riding along, you're in a virtual online gaming platform like Zwift, and you're riding along in one gear and you hit this climb. Trainer difficulty adds more resistance to the trainer and makes it harder to pedal in that gear, just like outside. So you basically have to shift gears to maintain the same power. So very similar to outside. It changes where the dead stroke is. It makes it harder, a little bit less momentum, a little bit less inertia through the pedal stroke. So it does a great job of simulating that. But some trainers, especially cheaper smart trainers, will max out at a 10% grade. So if you're at 17% grade in Zwift, they're really only simulating 10%. So 100% on those cheaper trainers, might be very manageable all the time. But if you have especially some of the more expensive smart trainers that go up to 30%, then if you're always at 100%, you will always feel 100% of the grade outside. So another thing that trainer difficulty, another way to kind of play with it a little bit is the gearing on your bike. And if your gearing's limited on your bike, so for example, my Zwift bike is a 1x drivetrain. So I have a 1x20, so I have a 3925 is my smallest gear, my easiest gear. So I tend to use not 100% trainer difficulty, just so that I'm not grinding below where I want to be. So it's a way to actually add some virtual gearing to your bike as well. And so moving on a little bit, should I be at 100% for the full winter season? I would say, and this is what I personally do, is as I get closer to outdoor riding season, I slightly, every once in a while, just bump up the trainer difficulty and that trainer feel, some call it, a little bit, and probably get to about 75% before I go outside. And that way that I am ready for it. That's another strategy to get ready for climbing outside. If you ride at 0% all winter season and you go outside and hit a hill, you will feel that hill a little bit more and may not be quite as prepared. So I'd always kind of, play around with the trainer difficulty, but I'm a big believer in go with what feels good and what feels natural, what worked with your bike, with what works with your gearing, but don't be dogmatic about it. I've seen lots of Facebook fights about trainer difficulty, but really go with your gut. There's no extra bonus points for being at 100% all winter season. There really isn't. So go with your gut, go with what feels good for you. And if it starts to feel too easy, if all those climbs feel easy, I'm doing air quotes now, which you can't see, then yeah, bump up the trainer difficulty. Nothing wrong with that either. So I've more or less come to the end. If you have any more questions before I get to this, what I'm doing next week, ask away, because this is the last slide. So next week, January 18th, I'm pretty sure it's a Monday, pretty sure I had that right. Same bat channel, same bat time. Sweet spot training. And this is a question that keeps coming up, and I'm not really sure why, but I did a video on sweet spot versus polarized because I had that question. And I don't always see a black and white like that. But I'm going to chat about sweet spot training, and I don't know where it comes from, but this notion that you should always do sweet spot training and always sweet spot training because it's sweet. So sweet spot training, Cole's notes is a training zone just below threshold, kind of above tempo, below threshold. And it is great. And I use it. The athletes I work with ride in sweet spot, but they don't do it all the time. And I'm going to go into why not. And so this was one of the questions that kind of spurred on what I want to do for next week. And so I can see that polarized comes across as better even when time is equated, meaning equal time, let's say 8 hours to 8 hours, which seems really odd to me. With time equated, how can going slower be greater than going faster? I love this question. I'm using this because I love this question. This is not a stupid question at all. And then I highlighted and bolded this. More work is being done in the same amount of time in sweet spot when compared to polarized. And really what they mean there is at a lower intensity, let's say zone 2. The only factor I see that could account for this discrepancy is the higher degree of fatigue accumulation with sweet spot, which makes sense if you're a pro, as you couldn't do 25 to 35 hours a week of sweet spot, but if you only have 6 to 8 hours to train, so we're talking about time crunched, and you can fully recover, then how could polarized be superior? So I'm going to chat about that next week. It could be slightly higher level. I'm going to go a little bit into physiology of why endurance training or zone 2 is different than sweet spot, and why polarized might be better. I don't want to call it superior. I personally have never used the word that it's superior, but why sweet spot, it's great, but too much of a good thing isn't always better. And more of something, because something's good, more of it doesn't mean it's better. Hold on, bear with me for one quick second. I might be having a text come in. Okay, so I think I just answered that. Yeah, so again, sweet spot is sometimes, and a lot of the athletes that I work with might know it as sub-threshold training, but others call it sweet spot training. It is just below threshold. It does tick off a lot of boxes as far as adaptations go, but it's still very different than riding slow. And this is something that's I've been, battling with, my entire career as a cyclist, and also now as a coach, is getting athletes to buy in and to embrace that sometimes riding slower will help them go faster. And it's something that I've seen time and time again. And so I'm going to go into why that could be. I'm not even going to say I know the answer why, because exercise physiology isn't a science. We don't know exactly what's going on in the body. There's many different processes going on in the body which are different for every person. But I'm going to go into why I think there could be a difference, and why one might help one athlete more than the other athlete. So anyways, it's been about 45 minutes. Went a little bit over this one. I'm going to try to make the next one 30 minutes or under. Again, thank you so much for tuning in. And I'm going to cut myself off. Thanks for tuning in. If you have questions about sweet spot training, next week is really going to be about training. So please email me. The best way to get your answers, me to answer your questions, is email or a little bit in advance. But always, join in and ask questions as we go. Keep me on my toes. That's great as well. So thank you very much. I hope this helps you maybe enjoy your indoor training a little bit more. Maybe you learned something that you didn't already know. That's my goal with these. And if you have any ideas for topics, I am all ears. I want to try to keep these going on Mondays, as long as I have something to talk about and people want to listen. So again, thank you very much. I'm going to cut myself off. Have a good rest of your week. Stay safe and wash your hands, all those good things. And we will see you soon.